B1, and therefore it's assessed in accordance with its policy allocation, which is where the council's formed its own strategy on our employment requirements as part of the overall strategy for the whole of the borough. But once we get past the 1st of September, because of the use changes to the use class, that could then in theory be a retail use. So therefore we are suggesting a condition that is added to the existing list of conditions on your report, which would be as listed there, which was, so it would be effectively condition 17, which would be a restriction to ensure that it is provided for office use only, effectively the B1 use that's been applied for, and no other uses within that class E, effectively without local authority approval. That's something that's relatively new, but as you can understand, if we didn't make that change, then effectively not only would it undermine sort of the local plan policies, it could also add a use to the site that we're really not wanting to support in that location. So I think just in summary, it is an allocated site for employment. Accesses have previously been agreed, and that's followed through with this outline proposal. It forms 17,000 square metres of the 25 square metre allocation. It will deliver large amounts of biodiversity offsetting, as you've seen from the proposal. It's required to deliver a footway cycleway, which it's proposing to do through the school, already it's subject to future agreement. And also the illustrative design shows that effectively that scheme is capable of being achieved. So with that, Chair, it is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malcolm. Right, we have no public speakers on this, so we could go straight into questions. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few questions, as you'd expect. Some of them quite easy, actually. So the plans show a foot and cycle path to Fulshire Park and Davenport Green. Just wanted confirmation on that. That's just through the access tunnel into the Royal London site. It's not carrying on along the boundary along the A34. And if it's going through that tunnel, has there been any kind of handshake with? I'm assuming this access in this case refers to both vehicle and the pedestrian and cycle path routes to the site. Similarly, has the connectivity with the Central Wilmslow been agreed with the school? Has there been discussions there? Because that presumably, if that doesn't go ahead, this is dead in the water. Just wondering if there's any 106 monies associated with the improvement of footpath 63, which is the one that runs alongside the railway track at the end of the school field. I read that there's a highways condition to secure off-site works on Prestbury Road. I was just wondering what that was. What's going to happen at the biodiversity site? What's the money going to be spent on there? Because it seems to me at the moment that it's just a green field and another green field. So I'm just wondering what's going to change there. And in light of what has just been said about the changes to classes, just wondering going forward, how easy will it be for a change of B1, office use to other uses if they show that they can't rent it out for a certain period of time or something in the new world where, as far as I can see, no one in their right mind would build an office block at the moment. So I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malcolm.
Yeah, I'll try and pick up some of those. I think most of them were about the connectivity in terms of the scheme itself. So there is I think the tunnel you're referring to is the one on the, might just bring a plan up if that helps. The
one under the rail track on the London site.
Let me just trying to see if I've got a plan that I can just share with members, just so that everybody knows we're talking about the same thing. So it's not that one. Yeah, so hopefully members will be able to see that one. The area that you're referring to, Councillor, is it this one? So
Yeah.
there's a tunnel underneath there that is existing. So that's nothing is changing with that in terms of. I think the proposals are as they are. I can't remember what it actually says on there, but I think it's one of those where it is a proposal. It's a pedestrian cycle link, I think, not a vehicular link through to Royal London, because that's.
Yeah.
I think that's there at the moment.
Yeah, it would be pedestrian. I was just wondering really whether that could be made a condition for this site and the Royal London application for them to create that link, because that would be a great link to Alderley Edge, and the 130 bus travels along Alderley Road, so that would connect with that nicely as well. But
I think it was something that we've certainly been trying to get as a linkage between the two sites. So we'll certainly look to try and to do that. I'm not sure whether it's actually been. I might just need to clarify whether that actually can be agreed in terms of the ownerships, etc. Because obviously, I don't know if it's actually owned by Network Rail or because of the railway above it. There's all sorts of safeguards on it, but it's certainly something that we would want to do. And it's been, as you can see, it's been indicated on the plan. So I'll maybe just try and pick that up as we go through any other questions or speakers. I think the other one, in terms of going the other way. I mean, Paul Ellis might be able to comment on the sort of the other contributions, but the footpath link here, I think the problem is that it's not a particularly good. It's not a particularly good route, I think, and I think what we're trying to do is to, given that this is a school site and there is already access through here, because of it, as you see, there's a public right of way that goes through there, so there is already public access to that point. There's clearly some safeguards that need to be put in place in terms of ensuring that it being a school site, that there's safeguarding in terms of the public having access through there. But like I said, there's already a public footpath, and I think, if I remember, it continues alongside the railway. If I remember,
it does. It's just very. The reason I ask is that's a direct link, and I mean direct to the train station.
It is.
And so people will be tempted to go down there, or it'd be very convenient to go down there, but it's quite a dark and lonely little path at the moment.
I'm sad to say I actually know it quite well, because when I used to go to school there, yeah, it's very narrow. And I think that's the point about trying to make this into a better sort of footway, cycleway. It's a little further to the station, but it's a much potentially more safer route. So I think that's something that certainly we're endeavouring to try and see whether we can get that done. I think in terms of the biodiversity point, I get your point. It's grass at the moment, and therefore it's going to be a grassland habitat when it's finished, because that's what's actually being proposed there. But if you like, it's sort of a managed grassland habitat. So it's something that basically it's not just a grassed area. It's obviously replacing probably. The current area is quite probably unmanaged and therefore has a higher ecological value, and that's why it's something that will change from its current sort of I suppose look, if you like, to something that's probably a little bit more of a sort of a longer grassland habitat, which has got greater ecology value. So that's what's being proposed there. Does that answer most things for you?
There's the how easy to change from B1. And the off-site works on Presbury Road.
Yeah, so I'll maybe get Paul Hurdis to bring that on the off-site highway works. The difficulty is, so on the current proposals, any existing office uses can be changed to a Class E. There is no, it's not even something that constitutes development. They're in the same use class. Yeah. So that's why we want to put the controls in place. Clearly, it's something that's very new. It doesn't need to come in place until next week, and we are hoping that a condition will be a strong enough control, because otherwise it is going to lead to all sorts of unforeseen consequences of out of town centre offices or developments where there could be a change that in normal policy terms would be something that we would resist for all of the usual reasons that we would do. So it's something that we're alive to. We're trying to react to it, but certainly in this instance, we want to make sure that it's brought forward for office uses, because that's what the employment is supposed to be, a high quality office employment site anyway. And what we don't want is suddenly some of the usual out of town retailers finding their way onto there, because that's not what we would want. So we'll just have to see how it pans out. But yeah, there will be there'll be issues in terms of permitted development changes and use class changes that we'll have no control over at all. So,
Okay.
all right.
Paul, would you like to address the off-site works, road highway works?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've just been looking through the comments that we made in relation to the application, and there was reference to the Melrose Way, Holly Road North roundabouts, which Presbyterian Road intersects with, and we do have an improvement scheme at that roundabout, and some tests have been carried out as part of this application assessment, that there would be some impact on that roundabout. But I don't think we've actually secured or recommending securing a section 106. I'll have to look into it a bit more, I'm afraid. I haven't got an answer at this moment in time.
Yeah, it was just, I read somewhere in the documentation that there was, it was subject to securing off-site works on Presbyterian Road, and I don't really understand what that was.
Yeah, I saw that, Council. It says off-site works on Presbyterian Road. Let me just look into it a bit further. I can come back to you later in the debate, hopefully.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, you okay now, Councillor Jeffrey?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Well, one of my questions has been asked already, and that was about sort of the mixed use issue. Understand that. Just a comment, really. I'm quite pleased with aspects of this. I think that a comment, if I may. I like the idea that the environmental offsetting is quite close to the site. Often we're presented with schemes where it happens at some distance away. This one's actually sort of within the same area, and I think the idea of sort of enhanced sort of grassland is a very good idea. And I also like the footpath proposal. Makes total sense to me. I'm not as au fait with the site, obviously, as people from Wilmslow, but it all stacks up and makes sense to me. My only concern was has been addressed. That's the issue of do we end up with sort of the usual culprits putting sort of out of town retail there, or warehouses? But is it possible to have some sort of mixed use development? But again, that's outside the remit of this group to determine. But I think all my questions have been answered, and subject to other things coming up in the debate, I'd be prepared to propose for approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Well, Councillor Redstone has a question, and then after the question we'll move to debate, because really I think Councillor Williams has set it off. But Councillor Redstone.
Yeah, can I just ask a couple of questions? Wilmslow Town Council said they had infrastructure issues. Would that be to do with the 1.1 metre pipe which the stream goes through, or is it to do with something else? And what's the solution to that, given that the ground is clay, so there will be a lot of runoff? How are you proposing that all the drainage will be of water will be retained on the site somehow, or is it, where is it going? And the other thing is that the town council also asked for mixed business use rather than just offices. So would that be your condition, or would it be just offices?
Coming on back on that one, Chair. So I think in terms of the I suppose dealing with the first, no, let's deal with that last one. So in terms of the office uses, so they've applied for B1 office floor space. The B1 use itself, depending upon how it's defined, is something that effectively can be used for. There's B1 there's at the moment 3 categories: B1A, which is offices; B1B, which is research and development; and B1C, which is light industrial uses that are appropriate to sort of, their amenity is not too noisy. Effectively, there's no adverse impact. So if there are those alternative uses that want to come forward, as it stands at the moment, then there's no reason why any of those 3 categories can't come forward under the current use plan.
Yep.
So we would just be looking to reciprocate that, so those same use classes could come forward in the future. What we don't want it to do is then change into something else. So those three uses, I've told, we're not looking to control anything further than what they've applied for. So it still gives them some degree of flexibility in those uses. So that's, but you know, it is supposed to be an employment site, so that's the extent of the flexibility that we can give.
Yeah, I agree, but that the mixed business use is it meets the criteria of the site, doesn't it? It doesn't just have to be offices. It could be, as you say, light industrial or any use that's suitable, which is a business use that's suitable near houses.
Yeah. So the proposal, it says, I think LPS 55 says it's an employment line for an exemplar B1 business use development. So it specifies it to that B1 business use, but there's those three categories within that business use. But that's the extent of the. If we went outside of that, we'd be outside of the site-specific principles of the site, which wouldn't be something that we'd want to do. No. In terms of the drainage, again, I will have to bow to the experts that will deal with these. We've got obviously conditions in respect of surface water, ground levels, and etc. and details and sustainable drainage. I mean, normally the principle of all developments these days is to basically consume your own smoke in terms of water.
Yeah.
So additional runoff, and increasingly obviously to hold that on site. The really hard examples are to hold it in big containers underground, but the more sort of friendlier and more ecologically based are the ones that basically you look to sort of deal with that in terms of sustainable drainage systems, where actually you've got open water, that areas that actually flood and basically consume that level and capacity. So it's something that, again, we've got conditions on there as we would do normally. So I'd be satisfied that those will be dealt with relatively straightforward. Whether that's exactly what Wilmslow are referring to in terms of infrastructure, I don't know. It's just that obviously they make a comment about infrastructure and drainage. So, but yeah, it is all clay, and obviously that brings its own difficulties. But yeah, it's not unusual to have clay in this area. So drainage and flood risk matters are dealt with by the team fairly regularly.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gardner.
On the same point, Mr. Malcolm, is it possible for us to specify at this stage that we would expect surface water drainage to be dealt with by way of a above ground and ecologically friendly drainage system? So putting a lake within the scheme to ensure that we not only do we attract. Does it create an attractive environment, but it also has ecological benefits? On the scheme that we obviously, it's an indicative scheme. There appears to be a bit of a brook to the right hand side of the image that I'm looking at, but not much more. And given the size of this scheme, I don't think it would be inappropriate for us to do that, especially as the photographs you showed earlier on show significant levels of standing water within the site, and given that it's below the level of the road, I'm anticipating that it would be very prone to flooding, and so I think we need to put a very specific requirement in the conditioning that we're asking for specific details. Also, I think we need to be very specific about what uses we have on the site. I understand what Councillor Redstone has said. I concur with his view that obviously offices are likely to be the biggest provider of employment on this site, but we need to make sure that we don't tie our hands by being challenged at a later stage by the developer who may wish to have a more fluid permission on the site by saying that we've restricted it to offices. That if we restrict it to all uses that fall within B1, that is quite a wide gamut, and I think it would make it much easier for us to defend that if such a condition were to be challenged at appeal. Thank you.
Chair, just to come back on the maybe the drainage point. I think obviously this is an outline application, so I suppose it's that when we get to the level of detail in terms of when we know what the drainage solution actually is, it might well be that obviously you've got an indicative plan that, as you say, doesn't seem to show any sort of surface water. There's no blue circles or anything to indicate ponds or sustainable drain or open sustainable drainage. There is obviously the area to the north, I suppose, where there's a bit more of a sort of indicative landscapes area potentially. So I think it's something at the moment we just don't have that detail. There's no reason why that won't come forward as part of. I mean, ultimately, if we're looking at, which this is supposed to be a sort of an exemplar B1 business park, then it's not unusual to find actually water features within those, and I would expect probably for that to include some of those, provided it doesn't take up too much of the land. There is just that slight balance as ever between what can be a sustainable drainage system, which is an area that basically may flood from time to time, and what is then also a benefit for ecology. I know my ecologist colleague would always say the two are actually can be completely different. It does depend a little bit on how much flood water they actually get. So there isn't always an ecological value with a sustainable drainage system, but the fact you've got open water and you've got sort of wet areas obviously does bring a greater benefit than having all of the water stored underground in a tank. So I think so I'm quite confident it's something that we can come forward with when we get the details and the detailed outline proposals come forward, the detailed reserve matters come forward. Whether I think at the moment I'd be a little bit reluctant to say that we should define that there should be some open water or open the suds on as part of the detailed scheme, because I just don't know whether we're going to then find that that's not something that is even possible or whatever. So I think we've got a couple of conditions on there at the moment. What we got? We've got sustainable water drainage scheme to be submitted, surface water drainage scheme to be submitted, full details of ground level, sustainable drainage management, maintenance lifetime. So there's a sweep of about 4 or 5 conditions that deal with drainage, and they'll all sort of tie into each other to enable them to actually come up with the overall scheme. Is that enough?
Yep.
Sorry, what if I can just kind of, is there an option to use an informative, which clearly indicates that we will prefer a sustainable above ground water feature? Because at least that we're giving the person that comes in with the reserve matters an indication of what we're looking for.
I'm just wondering whether we could adapt one of the conditions that puts that in as a preference, as opposed to maybe just a whether that's something that we can just put in as a preference rather than an informative. Informative isn't going to do anything in that respect. It's just it's what we'd like to see. I mean, most schemes these days do come forward with some surface water drainage, as in an actual some of a storage, external. So legally, I mean, maybe we can include it as one of the conditions with a preference for that, as opposed to a commitment on it.
That's even better. Thank you very much, David.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Right, now, anybody else with any questions? If not, we'll move to debate. If somebody wishes to kick it off, I think Phil kicked it off with proposing to accept the recommendations. Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry. Yes, I was just looking at the conditions, just coming back to the point that David Malcolm's just made. There is condition 16, a sustainable drainage management and maintenance plan for the lifetime of the development to be submitted. Does that already cover what we've been talking about, or would we need to sort of just expand on that a little bit? That's just a comment arising from the debate that's just happened, but I'm still inclined to propose that it be approved, subject to conditions. And I think if we do enhance that condition about preferring sustainable drainage in some way, then that sounds ample to me. That sounds very good.
Thank you very much. So we've got the tweaked condition that Mr. Malcolm was talking around with Mr. Gardner. Do we have a seconder? Oh, hang on 1 second. We have Councillor Hogben.
So, okay, Chair, I think Councillor Jeffrey wanted to speak, and so did Councillor Redstone before me.
Right, okay, we'll go to Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. This is actually my ward, so on the flooding thing, there is there is significant surface water flooding around where the entrance to the site is, so that will need to be addressed. So I suspect I'll have quite a bit more to say at reserved matters on that. But in some ways, this is the same as the Royal London application we considered last year, in that my view on that one was that Wilmslow doesn't need it, and it's likely to be damaging to the town by drawing office space away from the town centre. Well, I was advised at that meeting that damage to the town centre wasn't a material planning condition, so I won't pursue that one. This application's, it's got a couple of advantages over the Royal London one, though, in that they've met the parking standards, the allocation for parking standards on the site, rather than a massive over excess, so that it'll be less attractive for drawing businesses away from the town centre. So I'm quite happy with that. The other advantage is that it's the entrance to it's off the bypass, so there's less likely to be encouraging traffic going through the town centre. So I like that. So kind of on balance, and I don't think the town needs it, but I actually really like the scheme that the architect came up with, and with the indicative scheme. And at the pre-application meeting, the architect speaking was really quite inspiring, and I've got good confidence that it's going to be if they're still involved, that is, it's going to be a really nice, high quality scheme. So I think, like I said, I suspect I'll have more to say at reserved matters, because there's kind of environmental effects and the floodwater, things like that. But I think I'll be going with the officer's recommendation on it, so I'd be happy to second this.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Redstone.
I also feel quite positive about this proposed development. It does seem well thought out and well designed. And if provided we put in the flexibility of alternative uses within B1, I think it's probably sustainable, because I don't either think that this will be built as offices. I think the day of large offices and office parks are probably gone. So I also would support this, provided the issues regarding the ecology can be sorted out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Redstone. Councillor Hogben.
Thank you, Chair. I just want some clarity on what it is, what the recommendation is, because, excuse me, on page 55 of the committee papers, at the bottom, it's got a list of about 16 items, starting with network rail fencing and going over leaf to page 56. What's that? Is that an informative? Because the first part of it on pages 53, 54 and 55 has got 36 conditions. So what are those 16 items? What's that about?
Mr. Malcolm, can you help Mr. Councillor Hogben on that matter?
I did notice them this morning, actually. I think they're probably a kind of an error for. I was trying to work out whether there actually were informatives, but we don't normally have that many. So therefore, I think they're probably just notes that the officer would put on at the end of their reports before the more detailed conditions that you've got. So as you say, you've got 36 conditions, and I was just trying to establish whether. I mean, we would normally have informatives where there is network rail land involved, but we wouldn't normally have the detailed conditions you got there. So I think anything beyond condition 36 and the wording about the variation is there in error. So effectively, what you'd end up with, the additional condition that I'm referring to around the limited development would actually be condition 37. and those additional conditions 1 to 16, I think, were just initial thoughts from the officer when they were doing their report. I think is my take on that. So apologies for those, and apologies it's caused a bit of confusion.
Okay, well, could that be clarified and absolutely for sure before the vote is taken? Thank you.
Mr. Hurdis.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back to Councillor Jeffrey's point in relation to the access and off-site highway works. So there's, just for absolute clarity, and I just double checked it with a colleague of mine, there's two in terms of the highway access improvements. There's two, one off Pendleton Way, which is the left in, left out, which will obviously be created. Therefore, it's off-site highway works into the site. And also there are some works on Presby Road when you approach the Melrose Way roundabout. So what in essence is happening there, and there is a plan associated with it. The 2-lane approach is going to be made longer, so therefore you can get 2 lanes of stacking further back. So therefore it will help people approaching that junction from Presby Road and help make that roundabout work a bit better. So they're the 2 improvements. So the access into the site, and then there are some improvements to Presby Road, which is in essence creating a 2-lane approach further back, and both of those will be secured by a section 278 agreement. So no 106 contribution, it'll be a 278 agreement. So hopefully that's clarified that for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurdis. Councillor Jeffrey, are you happy with that explanation?
Yes, Chair, thanks.
That's fantastic. Now, do we have Councillor Gardner?
Very briefly, it was trying to assist Mr. Malcolm. My recollection when I sat in a chair like his was that when you'd often receive long letters from bodies such as Network Rail and the Highways Agency and people like that, and what normally happened is, in my experience, was that there would be a condition attached to the decision saying your attention is drawn to the requirements submitted by Network Rail, and they will be subsequent as a separate matter, because these are not the council putting on these conditions, but if they're not complied with, it's highly improbable that the development can take place, because I suspect a body like Network Rail will pull rank and say you can't do it until you've met with us. So we don't want a situation whereby we, the council, approve a set of conditions which are at odds with what Network Rail want in terms of when the details are submitted. I'm not suggesting we're at odds with Network Rail today. I'm suggesting that it might be that the level of detail we require is not as great or the same as what would be required by by Network Rail, particularly with regards to matters like scaffolding and things like that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gardner. Mr. Malcolm, does that help any?
Well, I suppose just to confirm that it is an error, because we've got repeated, for example, the Network Rail conditions are 11 to 13, and you've got electric charging points. So apologies for the confusion. They're just notes, I think, that the officer had left in from when they drafted the original report, and those were just literally, I suppose, aid memoirs to make sure we put conditions on in those respects. So, like I said, we've got electric charging points referred to there, and they're covered in the main condition list of conditions as well. So they're just something that can be crossed out. Councillor Gardner's right. There will be occasionally some informatives and some detailed conditions that we have, but we've got those shortened versions, if you like, which are down at 11, 12, and 13 on conditions. So we can just delete those additional points 1 to 16.
With the tweak that Councillor Gardner was talking about.
Well,
Yeah.
I think so. The conditions 11 and 13 and will include the details that Councillor Gardner has alluded to.
Is that correct, Councillor Gardner?
Yes, I hadn't gone back to look at to make sure there was a complete match of the conditions, but I suggest there are, and obviously it says Network Rail, so I trust the applicants, whoever they are, because it might not be the company that have submitted this application, will make the necessary arrangements to ensure that they are meeting Network Rail requirements as well as ours.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Hogben, was that satisfy you so that we can go to the vote?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I intend to go to the vote, and the vote was for the approval subject to recommendations proposed by Councillor Williams and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. So I'll go to the vote. So if you can say if you are for, against or not voting. So Councillor Edgar.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Gardner.
For.
Councillor Ogburn.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey.
For.
Councillor Morton.
For.
Councillor Redstone.
For.
Councillor Smethon.
For.
Councillor Wetherill.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
And I am for as well. So, unanimous. Thank you very much. We will now move on to the planning application, which is item 7, which is 20/1709N, A500 Newcastle Road, Bathamley, dualling of the existing 3.3 kilometre stretch of the A500 between junctions 16 and Meremoor Moss roundabout. Resubmission of planning permission 18/3766N, including proposed amendments to the approved design. Mr.
Sorry, Chairman, we've got 2 members wanting to speak. Councillor Smith wants to declare an interest and Councillor Edgar's asked to speak, but he will need to leave the room before we debate this application, and he needs to leave soon. So if we could ask him to speak first, and then he can leave.
Yes, no problem. Go ahead, Mr. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just recording the fact that I'm leaving the meeting now.
Right.
That's fine. I will remove him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edgar.
Thank you.
Councillor Smethon.
Apologies for the delay with this one. I just realised that I need to declare that I'm a member of the Cheshire Wildlife Trust, but I haven't had any discussions on this application at all.
Thank you very much. That's being minted as we speak, Councillor Smethon. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Malcolm, if you would like to do the presentation. Thank you.
Chair, it's actually Gareth Taylorson's going to present this one, but as yet he doesn't have a team, so he'll just do the audio and go through the presentation for members. But I'll share the screen, just get the presentation up for you. So I'll now hand it over to Principal Officer Gareth Tayloson for members. Thank you.
Mr. Tayloson, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so in front of you, the outline, the application site. So you've got the M6 motorway. Can you all see my mouse?
Yes.
Anyway, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. M6 motorway to your right, leading to the further roundabouts to the left, and the edge red is the application site. And this is just the aerial photo showing pretty much the same thing. So this is a resubmission, which I'll move on to in further detail later. But in essence, the top plan is the approved scheme that was consented, I think, December 2008, and below is the scheme currently being proposed. It's probably quite difficult to see the changes. I mean, in essence, it's now further dualling works are taking place on the south side. So in essence, you've now got greater mitigation areas for ecology, which is pretty much these areas here, and the bridges were proposed previously, but are now proposed to be demolished altogether and rebuilt, but not at the same time. I mean, for detail, these are the specific plans of the road improvement works, which I'll flick through. And these are photographs leading to and around the site. So that's the view going up towards the M6 motorway, and these are further down showing the stretch of the road, and that's just one of the an example of an ecology mitigation area. So I'll leave on the 2 change plans. Okay. So as you already described, it's obviously for the dualling works of the A500 between junction 16 and the Meremoor Moss roundabout. Further detail, it's looking to, in essence, widen the carriageway, predominantly on the south side. You're talking 7.3 metres wide with a grass strip on the side. It would also extend the Mere Moss roundabout and some capacity improvement works. And also, as I mentioned before, the two over road bridges, the Bathamley Road Bridge and the Radway Green bridges, would be demolished and rebuilt to accommodate that. So when I mentioned previously, this is a resubmission. So the earliest, well, this is a direct resubmission of that scheme, and the main changes, as I've already started to allude to, is now the works are greater on the southern side of the track, southern side of the road. And the main reason for the changes is due to the high pressure pipeline for the diversion works are to accommodate that. And it's also been advised that it's difficult, there's been difficulties keeping both bridges open at the same time for various safety reasons, which again I'll come on to in a minute. The main summary of the changes is shown on page 61. That's detailed in the table, which you should be able to see in the committee report. As previously, the land use has already been accepted from the earlier application. Just to clarify, it is sited within the open countryside on the green belt, so it is technically inappropriate development purely because it doesn't preserve openness, because it obviously occupies space that's free from development. Previously, we accepted there was very special circumstances. Those have been proposed and are relevant again and accepted again. In a crude summary, it's also the economic benefits and the fact that it allows the council to deliver wider schemes and includes HS2 as well. And obviously you've got the transport benefits that come with that. They were accepted previously as very special circumstances, and that is the case again. In terms of amenity, we did previously have a noise and vibration report which has been updated, and that's concluding that the noise impacts aren't significantly above the existing road noise, and therefore that's indeed acceptable. Highways have reassessed the information and are satisfied that the traffic volume, the number would have been the same for the approved scheme anyway, so that is a no objection again from Highways. There is quite a lot of tree loss, but again, that was similarly from the approved scheme. It's clearly a negative impact, but overall there is a net increase in replacement tree planting, which is secured by the relevant conditions. In terms of ecology, we do have an update that's on pages 7 and 11 of the update report, which I'll summarise for you if it's possibly a bit easier. I mean, in essence, the main issues was we didn't necessarily have all the relevant reports necessary to consider all the ecological impacts. We now have most of them, but not all of them. But in essence, we're satisfied that the impacts can be mitigated against. It's just now considering what level of contributions we need to secure as part of the agreement. So at the moment, it's just shy of, in essence, 100,000, which I'll come on to slightly later. So moving back to the report. It is in close as I talked about before, it is in close proximity to a gas pipeline. We've consulted National Grid and Cadent and the HSE, and all have come back with no objection. So that's partly why we've got this resubmission now, just to tweak the alignment to suit. There is a holding objection on the flood bridge section on page 85. There is a holding objection from the Environment Agency. That's because they haven't got enough information regarding the culverting of the brook. It is actually, well, it is just a holding objection because they haven't seen all of the required information. Now that's been provided, so we'll wait their comments on that. But I think as officers, we've taken the view that given that we've approved the scheme and the impacts aren't that greater, we're happy that a satisfactory conclusion can be reached. Therefore, requested that is deferred back to officers should members be inclined to accept the recommendation. So on that note, I'll finish back on the update report. You'll note on page 11 and 12, we have tweaked the recommendation. It's still to approve, but what we're saying is to approve. The approval will be delegated back to between the chairman and officers to consider the final biodiversity offsetting contribution in conjunction with our ecologist. We also need to refer it back to the Secretary of State. We did that previously and they came back with no objection. Also to defer back the flood risk comments subject to what the Environment Agency say and subject to the conditions listed on page 12. That's it from me. Thank you.
Councillor Addington. Are we there?
Hi, sorry, I couldn't hear for a second then.
I think it might have been me actually, not nobody else.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to say that as both a councillor and local resident, I am in favour of the A500 dualling project. I also understand that some inconvenience to local residents and motorists is unavoidable. However, I hope the plan can be devised and to be as considerate to the residents of Bathamley and Oakhanger in particular as possible. I do feel slightly confused by the current proposals. The original consultation revealed the utter chaos that would ensue if both bridges at Bathamley Road and Radway Green Road were to be demolished before being rebuilt. When the A500 was originally constructed, it cut through several farms and the two bridges were erected to enable farmers to easily access their land and livestock. To lose one or both bridges for any period of time would cause significant disruption to farmers. It could even possibly create animal welfare issues if the farmer is delayed in attending his stock, for example. Motorists would also be greatly affected. Any diversion route would increase journey time, mileage and fuel costs. And we must also consider the environmental impact that the extra exhaust fumes would have on this rural area. The original proposal set out by engineers as a solution to the problem was to build tandem bridges, ensuring that both routes would remain open throughout the project. And this solution was praised both by myself and residents of Bathamley and the surrounding areas. The plan was taken to the Cheshire East Planning Department, who recommended the plan for approval. And here at the Strategic Planning Committee, you were asked to approve the widening scheme, which you did, including the plan for the tandem bridges. The survey, as we know, was carried out and found a high pressure gas main, which interfered with the route, therefore suggesting a diversion. Following this, another set of engineers redesigned the route and stated at a Bathamley Parish Council meeting that the tandem bridges were then deemed to be unsafe. All of the above, the engineers' plans, the surveys were all carried out at great expense to the taxpayer, and we're now at a second meeting where you are asked to approve the second plan. What we seem to be being told is that you as a committee approved a plan last year that was dangerous with regards to the tandem bridges, but this was a plan designed by professional engineers and approved by planning professionals and recommended to the committee for approval. And are residents really expected to believe that out of the two sets of professionals, one may have got it so wrong? Demolishing one or both bridges at a time without the addition of a tandem bridge would risk cutting off the village of Bathamley. Diverted traffic to one bridge while the other was being demolished, would result in roads which are narrow in places, in bad condition, flood on a regular basis, and see a high number of walkers, cyclists, horse riders and heavy farm machinery struggling under the pressure of the extra vehicles. We would also see traffic diverted to the B5077 through Oakhanger, putting extra pressure on an already very busy road. So I ask you to please approve the widening scheme for the A500, but with the condition that the already approved tandem bridges are incorporated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Councillor Addison? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Look, Councillor Anderson, I represent All Sages, so I'm in the next ward along, and I am aware of some of the issues in Oakhanger with quite fast traffic going through there, actually, as well as heavy traffic. The issue I'm concerned about, I mean, you mentioned walkers and cyclists and horse riders, all of which are very valid, but I'm more concerned about the impact perhaps on sort of heavy agricultural vehicles, which cross those bridges a fair bit and also use the roads through Oakhanger and into Alsager itself. What do you think is the potential impact on the agricultural vehicles specifically of the scheme as it currently stands? Have you got any sort of views about that on that particular type of vehicle, i.e. where would they need to go? Would they have to go a long way round? Would it increase the volume of agricultural traffic down at the roadway lights, etc.? What do you think the potential impact is?
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to quite a lot of the farmers about this. I understand that from what I was told at Parish Council, I think at the moment they use a bit of a one-way system so that they're not meeting each other on the sort of quite narrow lanes. If we're losing both bridges, that's going to stop that for starters. They are going to have to go really through the B5077 to get round. I don't see any other sort of plausible route. We've got some farmers, one I was speaking to, he's got more than half of his land on the opposite side of the bridge, and he said, you know, in his tractor he's there in minutes, whereas if he's going all the way around he's looking at maybe 15 minutes with the added traffic and the extra route. So yeah, we're faced with quite a big issue with this, really. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions for Councillor Addison? Councillor Addison, thank you very much. If you could mute and turn your camera off, which you've done, that's fantastic. Now, the next speaker is Parish Councillor Teresa Clarke. You have 2.5 minutes, Teresa.
Hello. The residents of Bathamley Parish Council would like the following concerns to be taken into account if a traffic diversion is going to be put in place. Firstly, as previously mentioned, the lanes in and around the parish are mostly little more than single track lanes with very limited give-way opportunities. The condition of these lanes is already poor in most of the areas, with considerable verge damage and numerous potholes. Any additional traffic on these lanes will make a bad situation desperately worse. Secondly, in the past 12 months, our lanes have experienced multiple floods, causing vehicles to be abandoned, lanes totally blocked, and emergency services being needed to rescue people and their vehicles. Until no further flooding can be guaranteed, we consider these lanes unfit for any additional volume of traffic. Thirdly, our local farming community do currently use a mutually agreed traffic system along the lanes during their busy work periods. This helps to avoid congestion from heavy farm machinery. Any traffic diversion would cause unknown disruption to the farm working and be extremely hazardous for anyone else using the lanes during these busy times. Finally, the issue of public rights of way, which Council has a duty to protect and enhance. The current plan converges several footpaths onto 2 road bridges. This neither enhances or protects those public rights of way or takes account of public safety. Greater use of underpasses could resolve this issue. The residents of Bathamley Parish Council are placing their trust in our civil employees to make the best decisions for the safe passage of everybody using our lanes and footpaths during these necessary developments. We are therefore asking for the originally agreed proposal of tandem bridges being constructed during the A500 widening to remain, please, in the reviewed plans for the reasons mentioned above. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Teresa Clarke. Do we have any questions for Councillor Clarke? Do you know what? I'm getting, what's it with these? Councillor Gardner.
Councillor Clarke, you make reference to the convergence of all these footpaths onto the bridges. Can I just check, are these footpaths currently run across the main road? Or is it because of that they run on land that's perhaps parallel to the main road? I just need to, I've got visions of ramblers walking across, trying to cross an already busy road. And I'm just wondering why why moving them to over the bridges is a problem, but maybe you could give me a little bit more detail. Thank you.
This was an issue mentioned by the Bathamley Action Group. It's I have here a copy of a letter. It says converging a number of footpaths onto 2 road bridges over the A500 is a safety cost compromise and undermines the character and attraction of the footpaths. Running FP4 alongside the very busy A500 reveals a lack of ambition and vision for Bartonley footpaths. An opportunity exists to bring back life to Bartonley footpaths north of the A500. This can be achieved by the provision of 2 underpasses towards either end of the A500 modifications, one of which already exists, in brackets Anglesey Brook underpass. And then it says, in particular, point A, Bartonley FP4 be diverted to use the Anglesey Brook underpass. Point B, Bartonley FP7 and FP18 be linked by a new underpass at the end of the Smithy Lane, and this would open up access to other public rights of way. The proposal to divert Bartonley FP17, while not ideal, is acceptable given A and B above. I'm afraid I don't have an actual map of the footpaths in front of me, but I can certainly forward a copy of this to anybody who might find it useful.
Thank you very much. You've addressed the question that I wanted to ask, and I will then ask a question of the officer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gardner's pretty much asked the question that I was about to ask. Just to comment, though, I do use the footpaths around this area and they are very complicated. So I would be quite interested in any scheme that came up a way of joining them up and linking them. That might be separate to this development, I don't know, but that certainly is an issue. And I think the footpaths are underused and undervalued. There's a lot that more could be done with them. But essentially, Councillor Gardner has asked the question that I was going to ask.
Right. Any more questions for Councillor Clarke before I move on? No. Thank you very much. Councillor Clarke, thank you very much. If you could switch your camera and microphone off, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Cornell.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you yet.
See me now?
Oh, we've got you now. We've got
Jolly
you.
good. Weston and Basford, we stand shoulder to shoulder with Bartonley on this, Chairman. We support the dualling, but we urge that tandem over bridges are provided through Bartonley during the construction. The diversion routes are by and large along dangerous, narrow, twisting country lanes, pardon me, which are multifunctional, and this has already been mentioned. You've got horse riding, cycling, walkers, large tractors, Councillor Williams has said, and local traffic. In addition, the local road system provides a heavily used rat run to junction 16 on the M6. We live here and we witness near misses on a regular basis. To have to live with the diversion routes for what we understand to be about 7 months or longer if unforeseen circumstances arise, I think will be quite intolerable. And in this context, we still haven't seen a visible traffic management plan. And no account
seems to have been taken of the effect of the construction and the preparation works associated with the extensive planned developments within Weston and Basford Parish, much of which will be taking place while the bridges and dualling works will be going on. We're talking of about up to 1,500 dwellings, double the size of the parish, East Avenue, Basford East, South Cheshire Growth Village, and HS2, all wanting to use the local road system, the A500. That's a potential local nightmare with very much reduced quality of life and stress on an elderly population. Please listen to the local community on this one. If nothing else, the Radway Green Road, which is the main drag through Bathamley, needs to be kept open at all times in our view. And finally, we strongly support a local liaison group involving stakeholders and representatives of the local community to sort issues out during construction before they become major problems. This is an absolute must, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Councillor Cornell. Do we have questions for Councillor Cornell? Oh, it appears we have no questions, Mr. Councillor Cornell. So if you could switch your camera and mute, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now we'll come to our officers' comeback.
Sorry, Chairman, we've got the applicant representing the applicant, Andrew Marginson.
I'm going to have to get used to what's it now, because that's on. Now that's perfect. That's blurred. Andrew Marginson. Right, can we have Mr. Andrew Marginson representing the applicant, please? It's weird, isn't it?
Not very well.
Not very well. You're a bit quiet.
That's a bit better.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll shout. Okay. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. This scheme is dualling of the A500 between the M6, Junction 16 and Mirmore Moss Roundabout, as has been mentioned. It completes the dual carriageway route along the A500 between Crewe, the M6 and the wider region. The scheme addresses congestion issues at peak times, increases network resilience and improves safety for the A500 users. It also facilitates development of key strategic sites in the Council's local plan and supports economic growth in and around Crewe, including the construction and operation of HS2 and the HS2 Crewe hub station. The original outline design secured planning approval in December 2018. Subsequently, Balfour Beatty and Ramboll have developed the design following further surveys and new information received from National Grid and mainline pipelines. The fundamental concept of the scheme has not changed, but the aggregate extent of the changes has required a revised planning application. The Mirmore Moss Roundabout improvements require less space, and the westerly approach has been realigned to suit this. Locations of drainage ponds and changes to other drainage and flood protection features are necessary due to the ground conditions that were established during the ground investigation at the end of 2019. The fuel pipeline protection measures required by mainline pipelines required additional temporary working areas, and National Grid have two gas mains crossing the route. One of these needed to be diverted, whilst the other required localised realignment of the A500 so that it was adequately protected. Both these requirements have increased the temporary land take. The previous application indicated that the new bridges would be constructed without closing the side roads, so the tandem bridges. We do not believe this is viable without moving the bridges further west and creating a wider initial construction. This would increase the permanent land take, and due to the requirements of providing smooth alignment on the permanent carriageway, it would require extensive additional land on the approaches on either side. We also have safety concerns in the tight site associated with the original proposal, which includes the length of queuing traffic on the approaches on the one-way system, conflicts between local and construction traffic, live traffic immediately adjacent to the work areas, and construction plant working in close proximity to the public. The construction period overall would have been longer because of the the way the bridges were being constructed in two parts, and there would be increased long-term maintenance due to the construction techniques involved. It's appreciated that the closure of the bridges will cause some disruption. This will be mitigated by closing one bridge at a time and provision of additional passing places on the diversion routes. Once a detailed construction programme is established, a traffic management plan will be developed in partnership with the Council's Highways Network team, taking into account other developments and other highway works. In comparison to the original planning application...
Can you wind up now, please?
Yeah, due to the requirements of the statutory undertakers, the temporary land takes increased from 0.8 to 5 hectares, but the permanent has reduced from 3.4 to 2.2. Biodiversity impact will be compensated by the mitigation measures proposed, together with commuted sum to be agreed with the planning authority. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, do we have any questions for Mr. Marginson? No questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Marginson. If you would like to...
Hogben, Chairman, sorry.
Councillor Hogben, you have a question? I don't see that in there.
Yes, I put my hand up because you have to be so quick on there.
I am sorry, Councillor Hogben. I tend to look at the chat.
Yeah, and yeah, I have to be quick on that as well. Simple question, really. Are you saying, Mr. Marginson, that the idea of tandem bridges is not a feasible proposal then?
The way it was put forward on the original planning application, no. What we would have to do, so the original planning application envisaged building half of the new bridge alongside the existing, then demolishing the existing bridge and building the other half of the new bridge. And that was both the Bathamley Road and Radway Green Road. Unfortunately, the width of new bridge that was available to be built wasn't sufficient to allow what we felt to be a wide enough lane with verges, sufficient edge protection, the safety buffer zone that's required by legislation beyond the carriageway, and a suitable working area for the contractor to be able to build the second half of the bridge alongside. Now, it was working in conjunction with the contractor Bathamley that we reached those conclusions. To make it feasible, what we would have to do would be to build a wider deck initially, which would have moved both bridges further to the west, allowing us to build a wider deck to get the wider single lane carriageway. That would then become part of the permanent road. Now, the modern design, to allow a smooth approach to the bridges on the existing road, to meet modern design standards, we couldn't just have a very sharp bend at the end of the bridges, and I don't think anybody would want that. We'd have to have a much smoother curve, and because the bridges were being moved further over, the alignment of that road on the approaches would move further over, and it would move further back away from the bridges down each of the roads. So that would have created a lot more land take, a lot more disruption on the approaches to the roads. We also had concerns, particularly for Bathamley Bridge. The lane south of the bridge has lots of sharp turns in it. Now, the original proposal assumed traffic lights with single direction traffic going over the bridge, over the partly constructed bridge, I should say. Because of the bends in the road, those traffic lights would have to be set quite far back to make it safe, possibly even as far back as the junction with the main road through Bathamley Village. So that was another major sort of safety concern that we had there.
Okay, Councillor.
Right, okay. I'll try and digest all that, and I shall probably ask then Mr. Herders for his views on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Martinson's addressed the question I was going to ask. I was going to ask for more detail on the issues you raised about moving the bridges to the west and what was. But I would wonder, is there some kind of tandem system that would be feasible? I understand the thing about more land take. I understand that, and it would be considerably more land take. But I'm still concerned about some of the sort of health and safety issues with large agricultural vehicles trundling around, and I just wondered whether there was any tandem scheme that he would consider feasible.
We would need to provide a wider deck than was shown in the original scheme in order to provide a tandem scheme. So short of doing that, so I can't think of an alternative.
Okay, that's fine. That's clarified my thinking. Thanks.
Thank you very
much indeed, Mr. Martinson.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for Mr. Marginson before I go to officers? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Marginson. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylorson, do you want to come back on anything there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few issues. I think Mr. Marginson's covered the issue with the town of the bridges. Just maybe some additional comfort to members. Condition 19 in the committee report does ask for a construction management plan. So as part of that, we could look at routing and timings and things like that. So hopefully that gives some comfort. In terms of the question raised about the public right of way, I think from Councillor Clarke, we have consulted the rights of way team. That's detailed on page 74 of the report, and they have actually raised no objection, but they have requested a management plan. That's condition number 10 in the report. So that would look at the routing of the public right of way. I think also it's worth noting that it is obviously this is just a temporary arrangement anyway. Obviously, once the bridges are back in place, it's sort of service as it was, so to speak. And then finally, we've also, well, I have forgot to include a condition for the in the committee report. There was a condition for, in essence, a liaison committee between the developer and the parish council. I've missed that off, so the intention would be to put that on. It's not shown in the update condition, but it was shown in the original condition. So that's something that we'll add on. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll go to questions for officers. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor Hogben.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one about in the documentation. There's reference by the council's ecologist about a veteran tree. Just could they give us an update on that, please? Find out if that's been resolved.
Mr. Taylorson.
Yeah, I can't actually find it in the report and this correctly, but basically, yeah, James, our ecologist, did get some additional justification for the removal of that tree, and he didn't bring forward an objection on that basis. If that helps, I can look further into the report exactly the comment, but from memory, that's what the update was.
Okay, so the ecologist is satisfied because in the update report I saw it said he says that the plans must be amended. So it seemed quite strong language by him.
Do you want me to, yeah, if I can have a quick look through the report and find that exact bit and come back to you if that's okay?
Thank you.
Oh, there it is.
Councillor Hogben.
Hello. This will sound familiar. Is Mr. Herder still here, and is he able to answer questions about bridges? Oh, good. Just wonder what your opinion is about tandem bridges. that has been discussed and raised, well, particularly by the parish councils, and was recently answered by Mr. Marginson.
Hi, Chair. Hello, Councillor Hogburn. Yeah, I'm still here. First thing I will say, I'm not a structural engineer, so I'm not a bridge engineer, but I just think it is useful to maybe put a bit more flesh on the detail in terms of why this amendment has been asked for, in terms of just operating one bridge at a time rather than operating two, which was previously envisaged. I think at the time of the previous application, the actual detail of the construction and how the road and associated bridges would be constructed wasn't actually known, because that's a thing that we looked at later on. So the general effect and principle of development was looked at as part of the planning application. Then when that got approved, the detail of the actual construction and how it could be constructed safely was looked at by the contractor, which was Balfour Beatty. So hence why they've come back in for some amendments. And I mean, I have looked at the report in terms of why they have to change this, and they can't keep the bridges open in essence while the construction work's going on. And you know, I'm not here to question that in terms of why I think it might be okay. I mean, there's clearly a safety issue here, and to overcome the safety issue, i.e. to keep both bridges open to a satisfactory safety condition, would require, I think, quite a lot of money, to be honest, and it may well extend the build time of the actual improvement itself, the actual dualling of the road. So I think we've got to balance what's reasonable, and that's what I've looked at quite carefully, because I'm very conscious of the issues that are raised by the parish councils in terms of the diversion and, yes, the inconvenience that will be caused during the period of I think it's about 6 months or something like that, in terms of the closure of each of the bridges. So I've looked at what will be the effect, so how much traffic is actually using these two roads at the moment, and is it a lot, is it not? Well, the actual base flow is relatively low, so in terms of the actual effect, in terms of the diversion, it won't affect a huge amount of traffic in terms of obviously the main roads that we normally look at. So there will be some inconvenience, but I think in terms of reasonableness and the length of diversion, it's something that we would accept as a highway authority, given what we're trying to achieve. Obviously, this is a major infrastructure scheme we want to put in for the benefit of not just the local area, but also the wider area as well. So I think it would be unreasonable to insist that the two bridges are kept open during construction, and we would accept just one bridge with the diversion in place. But what I think would be worthwhile pursuing is the option of providing passing places on some of the existing roads that will be subject to diversion. So therefore, picking on the point that I think the parish council mentioned, the diversion of large agricultural vehicles, for example, how we can facilitate the diversion route from them and how they move around. I mean, I know the applicant has suggested looking into some of the diversions, looking into some of the provision of passing places, and I think that potentially would help alleviate some of the concerns of the parish councils. But I think the principle of just having one bridge open at any one time, I think, is acceptable, given what will be required in terms of extra cost, delay, and the reasonableness of it, really, in terms of insisting on both bridges are in operation at the same time. So I hope that helps, Councillor Hogburn. I say I'm not a bridge engineer, but that's sort of my take on it at the moment.
Just comment that I think for each of the bridges to be closed, or no, to be non-existent for 6 months, does seem rather a long time. I mean, yeah, I'm mindful that, for example, right now in Western Crewe, the A530 has been closed for a significant length from the end of June to the end of October. That's 4 months, and that's for the installation of a rail bridge, which is probably comparable, or maybe not quite so big, but anyway, it's sort of comparable to the kind of bridges that you might need over a dual carriageway, perhaps. Is 6 months not a long period? Is there any prospect that might be shorter, I wonder? Yeah, disruption is inevitable when there's roadworks of this magnitude, but I wonder if it's possible to mitigate that.
I mean, the timescale, the indicative timescale is what I've been advised of 6 months. I mean, there would be a condition for them to provide the detail of the construction programme, so there would be some more clarity put on the actual time they would be closed. And obviously I'm sure the applicant would work with ourselves and the local community if there's any room to shorten that by however it might be. I'm sure that's something that could be looked at. Just taking your point on the A530, obviously know that very well, Councillor Hogburn, but the A530, as you all know, in terms of the significant amount of additional traffic that uses that road rather than the roads that we're talking about here. So obviously I understand the point that you're making there, but obviously the flows are quite a lot higher on the A530 than will be displaced by this proposal.
Sorry, I was muted there. Thanks a lot. I was just.
Well, just before you go, Councillor Hogburn, I think before you disappear, I think Mr. Wayne Ashton wanted to come in.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying until I realised I was still muted. Yeah, okay, I'll stay here but mute myself now again.
Mr. Ashton, if you want to come in.
Yeah, I was just going. I've been involved with the A530 as well. The bridge deck would be a lot shorter on the A530. The span is more it is bigger for the A500. It can be comparable, but obviously once we've gone into the detailed planning, we'll be able to come out with how long the bridge is going to take. There's a lot bigger works involved. As I said, the span of the A530 is a lot shorter, and it's a lot easier to tie in because we've got to build plinths and stuff like that to get down, because we're demolishing the whole bridge, where Network Rail have demolished their bridge, but they're still tying into the existing carriageway, if you know what I mean.
Okay, I think I understand that. I was thinking there must be some kind of way of measuring, making some sort of comparison, taking into account bridge, like the size of the bridge, the span that's needed, the amount of traffic, and so forth, to come up with some comparison of, I don't know how you do this, but it's an idea, a comparison of the effect on the local community and so forth. I know they're very, very different. The only comparison is that it's the removal of one or two bridges.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So we now go to Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I want to redeem myself in the eyes of Councillor Jeffrey. With regards to his point about the veteran tree, I read similarly to him that although a mitigation had been submitted, there's nothing in the update report which assures us that the ecologist is satisfied with the mitigation proposed and that it overcomes his objection to the tree being removed. And more importantly, given that later on he provides us with a calculation as to what the commuted sum should be to offset the harm to the ecology by this proposal, can we take it that he's actually updated that so the figure that he presents in the report, in the update report, is inclusive of any compensation required for the loss of the veteran tree, and doesn't if we approve this scheme this evening, I suggest that that figure is revisited to ensure that the ecologist who is not present this afternoon is able to confirm that he is satisfied with the number provided and that it shouldn't be higher to take account of the veteran tree if he does, as is suggested by the officer, agree with the tree's removal. And the reason why I asked to speak wasn't to do with that. It was to do with the diversion of footpath FP4. Given that there is an existing underpass, I understand why we can't necessarily require new underpasses to be created that might significantly add to the cost of this scheme. But if there's an existing underpass, surely it makes sense that the FP4 is diverted along that route. And while I accept that would have to be the subject of a FP, a footpath diversion, we could at least include it as perhaps an informative, which seems to be my in word for this meeting, as a part of that we would consider the favourably consider the rediversion of footpath FP4 along the existing underpath. And I'm afraid I can't remember the name of the brook that was referred to, but I'm sure the officers will be aware.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. The point that Mr. Hurdis made about small volumes of traffic using some of these little side roads, totally agree with that. There isn't a great deal of traffic using those. However, it's back to this point about the kinds of traffic we're talking about, large agricultural vehicles. I do accept it was said that there was some comfort in that there would be a plan devised for that, but it strikes me, and you know, at the risk of going outside the remit of this group, is that there are the problem we've got is some long-standing traffic issues in this area. I mean, essentially talking about roads that weren't designed to be driven on for a kick-off, but I'm wondering whether some mitigation could be put forward as part of the scheme towards the very considerable problems that both that Oakhanger in particularly is facing with traffic speeds. That's been raised lots of times.
Councillor Williams, I think what we're going to do is, before we go any further, I think this is going to be opening the debate.
Okay, fine, fair enough. I can wait, and I'll add this.
No. I'm going to start to open the debate with you now.
Okay, right. Okay, in which case, thanks, Chair. That's great. I mean, you've got to look at the thing holistically, and I know we've got to look what's in front of us, and we can't talk about the whole traffic problems of the whole region. But it does strike me that there are certain specific issues here that we need to address. I don't know what the creative solutions could be, but there has to be something. I think managing, I mean, at the moment, it's interesting that the agricultural vehicles, they've got a gentleman's agreement, if you like, as to who goes when and that sort of thing, and that works well. And I'm sure that some solution like that could be found looking at that. But at the same time, I think what's exacerbating the problems here is that the very real concerns that the parish councils have of rat runs, of speeding. I know there have been attempts in Oakhanger to have traffic monitoring every now and again. Doesn't seem to solve the problem. That stretches into Alsager as well, where people speeding past the Radway nursery there, and there's been accidents there in the past. I'm just worried that there's going to be a fatal accident or a serious injury here before anything's done. And I'm just making a plea that whatever we look at in terms of the traffic side, is that we take real due consideration of the health and safety aspects, because it's not just people taking shortcuts. We're talking like huge agricultural vehicles. We're talking people exceeding the speed limit very regularly through very narrow country lanes that weren't designed for this kind of volume of traffic. So it's I think whatever solution is come up with has to take those points into consideration, and safety has to be a priority.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to be involved in the debate? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. If this proposal was coming before us afresh, rather than as a variation on a theme, I think we might have had some cause for concern. The problem we have is that we're mixing planning aspiration and theory with the practice of putting a road in on the ground. And so from that point of view, I think we have little option but to go with the proposal as referred. I have a lot of sympathy with the local residents and with the both councillors Addison and Councillor Edgar, but also with Councillor Williams, who obviously who's and the crew councillor, I can't remember whose crew ward is immediately next door, who will be detrimentally impacted by any construction, but the terminology of eggs and omelettes is probably appropriate in this instance, and so I would be happy to recommend that we go with the officer's recommendation, subject to my earlier request that there is clarification about the the ecological commuted sum figure being agreed with the ecologists, because I suspect there is no way of us diverting the road around this tree unless we're going to do what they do on the motorway over the top of the Dales, where you've got that silly house in the middle of the motorway. So yeah, I think that we have the only option we have facing us is to approve this scheme, but I would like to ensure that we get the maximum ecological compensation that is available. Thank you.
Thank you. Just two things before you disappear. First of all, the daughter of the people that had that house in the middle of the motorway up on the 62, she lives in Middlewich. The next one is, weren't you putting forward to divert footpath 4 to the underpass?
No, I was suggesting that if we can have an informative that suggests that that the footpath FP4 should be diverted along the existing underpass. I think that's reasonable, but it's an informative because actually I know that the footpath diversions have to be dealt with by the Pro Committee, so that's not for us to determine today.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Smethon.
Thank you. I'm quite interested in this now. I have the Congleton Link Road that has been built in the southern part of my area, and this experience of road building has been quite an eye-opener for me. There's no doubt that the rest of the dualling is needed, and there's a big picture of the overall large global benefit compared with some short-term difficulty for local people, which I hugely sympathise with, because my ward is rural and large farm vehicles, delivery vehicles, the new cyclists and walkers have not been a happy combination, so especially as the traffic has become busier again as people begin to go out and about. But it's historically been like that for some years as well. So short-term delay compared with long-term benefit. And I think we really may have to bite the bullet here and try to just balance everything up. So until I hear anything different from my colleagues, I think we should be going ahead with this. I'll leave it to the rest of you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hogben, you wish to come back? And then Councillor Jeffrey.
Yes. I mean, this is a scheme that's been a very long time coming. I think I've said this before. It's quite a few years ago that a one-time borough councillor for Shavington, and more recently a borough councillor for in Cheshire East for Shavington too, they made the point that you could travel all the way from Felixstowe to Holyhead and use that trans-European network route.
There's all sorts of Lemons and Faithwell.
Sorry?
Francis.
What's that? Anyway, it's part of the trans-European network, and we are still part of Europe, thankfully. And the first bit of single carriageway you'd come to after leaving Felixstowe, more or less, would be when you got to the Bathamley link. So this is, if you like, completing a national link. So it's got, it's got great, it's got big significance. I take on board the comments from Councillor Gardner about eggs and omelettes. I'm sure that there must be some means, though, whereby the impact upon the local people can be mitigated. It can't be avoided altogether. I think that's inevitable. But it must be possible to mitigate that by some means. So I've got a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Williams was saying. But in the end, well, I'm prepared to second the proposition that we actually approve this, subject to any amendments that people might care to put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ogden. I'm very minded, but just before I come to go on, I'll come after you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. I've not got a lot to say anyway, because I don't live in this neck of the woods. I don't know the inconvenience that people experience driving to work every morning, and I don't really know. I've not seen it quantified anywhere what the actual benefit will be of this improvement. I know that it's to support HS2, but if that doesn't go ahead, etc., I don't know what the benefit will be. So I'm having faith in that the officers have done an assessment of that, and I really do sympathise with the residents. I live in Wilms. I used to work in Warrington, and when the airport city was being built, I was a very angry man every morning driving to work, and I can sympathise with the residents because they'll go through the same thing on a short-term basis. But I think the principle of this dualling has been approved on the previous application, and I think, like it's been said previously, I think we just have to bite the bullet, and I think this needs to go ahead. So I was going to second it, but Councillor Hobden's done that. So thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I mean, I know we're saying it's on the back of HS2, but anybody that actually uses the A500 at peak times will know that that is a bottleneck where it goes down to one lane. Bearing in mind we're going to shove another 850 houses just off the A500, which we've discussed today. I think it's probably a 50-50 HS2 and beneficial to the locals. The roads around Bathamley are atrocious at the best of times because of how narrow they are. I'm very minded of one of the things that Councillor Connell said, where there isn't a traffic management plan. I think if anything needed a traffic management plan, this application definitely needs a traffic management plan for the surrounding areas. I would like to see, I know that we said it was part that we were doing a construction plan, but I would like to see a condition where it has a traffic management plan for the surrounding area. I'm just wondering if that is possible. Mr. Tailson.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I think what I normally do, or what we normally put like a shortened version of the condition. I'm certain that it did include traffic management, but if not, we can certainly add that in.
Thank you very much. Well, with that amendment, are you happy to take that amendment, Councillor Gardner?
Definitely.
And Councillor Hogben?
Certainly.
That's fantastic. Well, if nobody has any more questions, I'm happy to go to the vote. We have a proposer with the amendments, which is Councillor Gardner, and a seconder in Councillor Hogben. I will go through alphabetically. If you can say yes for support, no for against, and not voting if you don't wish to vote. So, Councillor Edgar's left the meeting, hasn't he now? So, Councillor Farrell.
He's gone as well.
Oh, and Councillor Farrell. Councillor Gardner.
Definitely yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hogben.
In favour, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yes.
Councillor Morton.
Yes.
Councillor Redstone.
Yes.
Councillor Smethon.
Yes.
Councillor Wetherill.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor Williams.
Very reluctantly, and only if there's a management plan, then yes.
And I'm following your lead on that one, Councillor Williams. I agree, but with that in mind, thank you very much. Unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Just one thing there that I would like to note, that I noticed that Councillor Redstone was keeping his picture on so that everyone can get envious of his headphones again. Right. Now, this is where I will move over and the chair will become Councillor Gardner. So, Councillor Gardner, would you like to take over?
I'm calling him in. Yeah, is he? Can I just check?
Right.
Sorry,
So
Chairman.
do you need to do something technically so I can see the, or do I just watch the chat down the side of the panel like I'm doing now?
Yes, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Gardner, and I'm just checking that Councillor Eggers back in the room as well.
Oh, I was going to. That was the first thing I was going to say. Is can someone let Councillor Egg to know that he can stop his shopping?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
Right. So I now have to have two computers. So we are going to the. Oh, I just had the. Deleted it. Please bear with me a second while I get to the right place in the script. Right, we're now moved to item 8, which is Brooks Lane Middlewich Development Framework Supplementary Planning Document, and I will ask Mr. Jeremy Owens to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, members. I'm just going to share my screen. So hopefully what you can see there is a first slide saying Brooks Lane Development Framework.
That's what I have on my screen, Mr.
Excellent.
Owens. I'm hoping everybody else does. If not, can you please indicate by putting a message in the chat?
Okay.
No one appears to be doing that, Mr.
Right.
Owens, so you can carry on.
Super. So this report relates to the Brooks Lane Development Framework. And the preparation of the development framework is a requirement of policy LPS 43 in the local plan strategy. And when I say framework in the context of this presentation, I mean the development framework rather than the national planning policy framework, just for the avoidance of any doubt. So policy LPS 43 of the local plan allocates the Brooks Lane site as a strategic location for mixed-use development, including, amongst other things, around 200 homes, new leisure and community facilities, new pedestrian and cycling connections, a potential new marina, and a new railway station for the town. So the framework's been prepared by consultants on behalf of the council, consultants Barton Wilmore. They're experienced master planners, and it illustrates how the development that's envisaged in the local plan could take place across the site. And sets out the matters that any schemes would need to address. It doesn't prescribe the detail of individual schemes in terms of their exact design or composition. That detail will emerge through a planning application process with those proposals having regard to the development plan and its policies and other material considerations, which would include the development framework, subject to its adoption as a supplementary planning document. So, and while the allocation of the site's intended to encourage further investment and regeneration in the town, it is nevertheless quite a challenging site at the same time, which the framework acknowledges. It's in multiple ownership. It's a brownfield site that's been subject to various industrial uses and currently is a large industrial estate. There are access constraints, there are heritage assets that need to be protected, and there's a need to very carefully manage the relationship between any new homes and any businesses that are going to remain on the site. And the framework looks ahead 15 to 20 years, so not necessarily everything that will happen on the site will happen during the current local plan period, which takes us to 2030. Just to say that the sorry, switching slides there too early, that the provision of 200 homes on the site is a very important component of Middlewich's housing supply, and that constitutes just over 10% of the expected level of housing development identified for the town in the local plan strategy over the plan period 2010 to 2030. So the framework's underpinned by a very thorough analysis of the site and its surroundings, including current land uses, access and connectivity, blue and green infrastructure and heritage assets. The framework, as you would expect, it requires good design, the creation of a place, of a strong sense of place, good pedestrian and cycle connectivity, and appropriate green infrastructure and landscaping. And that's illustrated through a series of character areas, and they create a vision of how areas across the site could be potentially transformed. So one example is a new railway station on the site as part of the reopening of the Northwich Middlewich Sandbach rail line for passenger services. And that builds on the local plan strategy, which shows the general area in which a station could come forward. And the framework now illustrates where that new station platform could be located, and its associated facilities, including drop-off and parking provision. And it also shows that development potentially linking up to the opening up of Murgatroyd's Brine Works to visitors. Now, what the framework can't do is guarantee that the rail line is going to be reopened for passenger services, but this is about doing what we can through the framework and other planning documents, including the local plan, to recognise and support that ambition. So another example is a shorter term opportunity at the southern end of the site, adjacent to the Trent Mersey Canal, for residential developments, including a new marina and an opportunity here to enhance the canal corridor, which is a conservation area, and create space for people to enjoy the waterside. And as I say, as well as making an important contribution towards Middlewich's housing requirement. So the framework's been informed by a significant amount of local engagement and consultation. That's taken place over 3 main stages. There were a number of initial workshops with landowners, residents and businesses within the site in 2018. And at that time, there was also one-to-one meetings with the Canal and River Trust and also Middlewich Town Council. Then in 2019, there was public consultation on the first draft of a framework. And then finally, earlier this year, an opportunity to make representations on a final draft of the framework. And the details of this most recent stage are set out in a report of consultation, which is Appendix 1 to the SPB report. We received 24 responses to that final draft. And of course, the comments that we received in the previous consultation rounds and through previous engagement have all been taken into account in shaping the final version of the framework that's appended to the report. And so finally, just a recap of the recommendations in the report. The report invites the Strategic Planning Board to consider the latest set of representations and associated changes to the framework. And it's an opportunity for the board to express its views and for those views to be considered by Cabinet on the 8th of September, when the adoption of the framework as a supplementary planning document will be decided. So thank you, Chair. That's all I was going to say by way of introduction.
Thank you very much. I will now ask Councillor Hunter to address the meeting. He has 5 minutes, so if you can put his microphone and camera back on, please. Sorry, can Mr. Owen, can you remove your images from the screen? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I don't intend to keep people here too long. like most plans, the Brooks Lane master plan is good and in some cases not so good. The hope that we may get a railway station and that land allocated for it will hopefully safeguard that land, although there's nothing sure about that, is a good thing. But one thing that we do have in Middlewich is we have a passion to reinvigorate our town, and part of that is by using our history and the canal corridor. In fact, the canal corridor is the basis for nearly all our history, both leisure at the moment and industrial in the past. Middlewich Town Council did put in a comprehensive number of comments and recommendations into the latest consultation, and one of them was the marina. Middlewich sits in a very unique position with which is on the Cheshire Ring. It is, I mean, we have a little bit of history in the canal there, as we have the shortest canal in the whole of the country, which links the Trent and Mersey to the Shropshire Union. We see the installation of a marina as part of the regeneration of our town, hopefully boosting our local economic standing. The problem that we have is the 20-bay marina is not enough. Now, we have had consultations, or we've had words with planning officers about the 20 to 50, because I think we should, the town council said we should have 50. What I'm asking the committee to do is considering asking the cabinet to change one line on page 182, which says provision of a circa 20-bay marina. Now, I would like to change that wording to a provision of a marina of up to 50 berths. This doesn't mean that we will get 50 berths. It gives us a negotiating stance with developers. We understand that it is not just a question of us demanding and getting, but we would like Cheshire East Council to amend that line, because it then gives us a chance of looking at a better option than what we have. By the time you take away the berths from the front of the canal, which this master plan will do, the marina will probably only give us a net gain of maybe 1 or 2 when I counted the berths last night. So this is what I'm asking the committee to do, is to support Middlewich Town Council on rewording one line on page 182 of your report, the line which says provision of circa 20 berths marina to the provision of a marina of up to 50 berths. I really hope you can do that. It will give us a chance of making something more of an asset that we have got. Thank you very much, Chair.
Before you go, Councillor, can I just ask, are there any questions for Councillor Hunter? Councillor Smetham? And then Councillor Williams.
Just to check on what you said earlier, so is there an official number of berths, or are they informal, or how does it work? Is it only just 1 or 2 more berths in the proposal?
Well, what happens at the moment, Councillor Smetham, is the chandlery, which sits just below the lock to where this development would be and the master plan covers. The chandlery, they have a certain number of berths that are going up the canal. Quite a large number of them, about 14 of them berths will go. And when if the master plan and the development that's already in gets its way, and they will be replacing that with 20. So it's more of a like for like, not a net gain. When you consider that just a few miles away, there's been 2 new marinas. One is a 100-bay marina and it's full. And the other one is a smaller, but it's around 45 bays, I think. That's full. And and a marina, which is further up the canal network, that's full. There is definitely a call for a marina. I understand that our officers have to look at what they think and deem is achievable. But for us as a town council, what we're asking for is to give us a chance to make what we feel is a chance of growing that side of our tourist economic structure within the town, and it will lead on to other things. I know it's very difficult. I'm not stupid, but all as we're asking for is a chance. We want a chance, and to do that chance, that's why we're asking for the change in wording. Out of all that document, I think 6 words is not a bad thing just to change. Thank you very much.
I guess we need to check with the officers what that impact that might have on the overall project, but I'll do that.
I agree with that. I mean, Mr. Owens said that it's following LPS 43 and the detail will come later, but that's not quite right, really, because it says in LSP 43, it says the potential provision of a marina at the Trent and Mersey Canal, but now it would seem that they've actually put detail in there by saying circa 20 berths. So they are adding detail. So I think we need to change that detail. We're only saying up to 50. So we might get 25, we might get 30, we might get 15. I mean, we're taking a chance just as much as Cheshire East would be taking a chance. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. This is probably one for the officers, really, but I'll ask you as well. Page 32, page 133, page 32 of the sort of the comments and the answers. We've got Middlewich Council's bid, if you like, about the marina, and the answer to that, it says the references to circa 20 berth marina are considered appropriate following engagement in the development of the master plan with an indicative location identified and tested at a high level through the SPD. I'd like to know more about how that was tested and assessed. That seems a very definite statement to me, that it's deemed adequate. My personal inclination is to go with you, because I'm a big fan of the canals. I think they bring a lot of money into the area, bring a lot of tourism to the area, and we should be looking at every way of maximising that. But it does strike me that there's an interesting comment here that it's deemed appropriate. I'd like to know a bit more on what grounds it was deemed appropriate. Well, surely no one's just gone and pulled a figure out of the air. How's that been arrived at is the question I've got.
Well, Councillor Williams, there'll be 2 answers to that. There would be my answer and then there'll be the officer's answer.
Yeah, I'll ask the officers as well.
Obviously, and their answer will be that they have tested it and it will be 20 because I believe, this is my opinion only, that the size of the marina at the moment is development led and not led. The master plan should, in my view, fulfil 3 things. It should fulfil the ambition of the town, the ambition of the local residents, and the ambition of Cheshire East Council. And it is about amalgamating and coming to a decision which suits everybody. For me, the developer started off with 12. It was knocked back and now we went to 20. And now we're saying circa 20. It's a chicken and egg situation. Did the circa 20 come before Cheshire East, before the developer got knocked back, or did the circa 20 come after? So was it developer led or was it council led? I don't know. I don't care. What I want to do is give us a change of line within a document which allows us to go up to 50 berths. It doesn't commit us to 50 berths. It doesn't commit us to any number of berths. It commits us to a number really from 0 to 50. What it does do is it gives us a chance, if a developer comes along, do you know what, I'd like to put 50 berths in and we've gone to circa 20 and we can't do that, then why don't we just go to the 50, up to 50? I don't think it's a big word change. I mean, in 2001, I've had an officer that says to me there is no evidence that a marina was wanted or needed as such. Well, in 2001, PB Developments, which is obviously part of the poaching system, PB, of Knutsford, got planning permission for 150 boat marina in Middlewich. That land's now gone. So there is a history there of the town wanting. There is a need, because if you go to all the marinas around here, you'll find most of them, if not nearly all of them now, are full. I think it's about giving the town a chance, because without a chance, we don't stand anything. I don't think it's hard for Cheshire East to give Middlewich that chance. But obviously, I think Mr. Owens will give you a completely different answer.
Before I go to Councillor Jeffrey, I meant to, before I called Councillor Hunter to speak, in the interest of openness, I have to declare that I wasn't aware until Mr. Owens made reference to it earlier on this afternoon, that he'd been working with a company called Barton Wilmore in respect of this document. I have to declare that I am a former employee of that company and I'm still a member of its pension scheme. Though I've not spoken to anybody about this scheme, as I didn't know it was even theirs until this afternoon. So there we are. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. I think we're labouring the point a bit too much, but on this line that you want changing, would you have any objection to us removing the number altogether? I'm trying to just have the flexibility, because I don't know what the officers are going to say to the question. So if we were to remove provision of circa 20 berth, if that was to be changed to provision of a marina, would you have objections to that?
Well, I wouldn't have objections to that. I mean, I would sooner keep it to circa up to 50 rather than the circa 20. One of the officers that spoke to me about this was saying that even the Canals and River Trust were against a bigger marina. Well, I've seen that documentation now, and that's not true. They're not against the size of the marina. They're worried about the water, the amount of water and drain into the water for the marina. That's what they're worried about. I'm quite happy to have no number on it, because that means I could go up to 150 like PB Development's got planning permission for. And if anybody wants to check, that's in the Maritime Journal. And if they want, I can send them the link to that. I can tell you that the first piece of the first time I can remember, or can't remember, but remember reading about when the marina was first muted was on Croxton Lane and was in 1970. So there is a history of a marina through the town. What we have to remember is Middlewich is in a special position on that Cheshire Ring, and we need to take advantage of it. It is one of our assets and we need to use it. By changing the wording, it gives us a chance. That's all I'm saying. Give us a chance.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Councillor Hunter, and enjoy the rest of your day.
I intend to. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so I now go. It says in my script that I need to ask Mr. Malcolm whether he wishes to respond to any of those questions, but I suspect he would prefer that I address that to Mr. Owens. So, Mr. Owens, do you wish to come back on any of those points raised?
I can do, Chair. Thank you. Would it be helpful if I just explained a little bit more of the background in terms of how Barton Wilmore got to the circa 20 berths? And then, respond to the, I think, there's been two suggestions really. One that it refers to, the text says up to 50, or removes the number altogether and just establishes, the acceptability of a marina in, in principle, reinforcing the local plan policy. So first of all, in terms of Barton Wilmore's work, I mean, first of all, it's important to say that this development framework is illustrative. It isn't prescriptive in any way, and very deliberately it talks about a potential new marina circa 20 berths. So there is some flexibility around that number. Now that number reflects what our consultants considered appropriate and achievable on the site, and it did follow discussions with the Canal and River Trust. It was evident that the provision of a new marina was going to be quite a complicated, major, costly engineering operation. the site would have to be excavated out to create a new water basin. And the Trust's initial input into the framework in 2018, they said they had, and I quote here, serious concerns about a policy which allocates a site for a marina, or especially one that might specify the number of berths to be provided. And they also pointed out, as Councillor Hunter said, that there would be significant technical work required and specific approval by them for a new marina. Now, what Barton Wilmore did as well is they looked at other examples of marinas elsewhere up and down the country, and they also took into account feedback from local interested parties, and that included the owner of the King's Lock boating business and also the owner of land adjacent to the canal. And both of those parties were throwing doubts on the feasibility of a larger 50 berth marina. Barton Wilmore were also mindful that this is quite a challenging brownfield site in itself, and actually achieving any development on this site to facilitate regeneration, is quite challenging. So it was really taking all of that into account that they put a position that they did around a 20 berth marina in the document. So I suppose the viability of delivering a new marina is an issue. That said, the framework doesn't stop a larger marina coming forward. I mean, the wording that Councillor Hunter puts forward embodies a lot of, flexibility, as he said, that, it doesn't prescribe that a marina of a minimum of 50 berths is going to come forward. It says it up to. So it opens up the opportunity and a signal that we would be happy to see a larger marina on the site in principle. I don't see why that would be objectionable at all. And the alternative approach, to take out a number completely, I suppose, that's another option. But I suppose, does that really take us forward in terms of providing additional guidance over and above what's already in the local plan strategy? So, I mean, ultimately, this is an opportunity for the board to express its views and to have those considered by the cabinet.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Malcolm, do you wish to come back on this item at all, or are you leaving it all to your colleague?
No, I'm happy for. I mean, Jeremy's aware of, and I'm aware of what the issues are. So Jeremy's speaking on my behalf in this respect.
Thank you very much. In that case, can I ask, are there any further questions, or does somebody wish to start the debate? And I'm conscious that I'm not aware of the geography of members relative to this site, given that Councillor Hunter has now left, but maybe Councillor Smethon is the nearest if she wishes to start, but I might be wrong there, and I apologise if I am.
It could be with Lower Withington away across near Cledford, possibly. I'm happy to start if you wish. Yeah, I've had a good read of all the ins and outs, because I wasn't aware of what was going on here, and I think would be great support in Middlewich for probably very much needed items there. Not quite so concerned about the marina numbers, although I can understand it could be challenging. It could be a rather select niche offer with just the select few berths, as long as the supporting development was cognizant of what was going on there. But yeah, it all seems very very suitable, and I'm quite content with everything that I've read prior to this meeting for an approval here. But I leave it to hear what everyone says, of course, as usual.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Smethon. Can I just say that although I note that Councillor Williams was off before Councillor Jeffrey has asked to raise a question. So as it's a question, he can go first, and then I will go back to Councillor Williams.
Sorry, Chairman, I think they were earlier on, those questions.
Yeah.
Oh, were they?
Yes, Councillor Gardner. No, that was me before speaking to.
Oh, okay, and so we've had all that. That's fine. Okay, right. In that case, I think I have Councillor Hogben and then Councillor Williams.
Might be true. Right. Well, I'd like to cut to the chase. I'm quite happy to propose, to suggest basically that we recommend this to the Cabinet for approval, subject to an amendment to that item on page 182 to read something like the provision of a marina with a capacity of up to 50 berths, then as printed. So that's what I'm happy to propose that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hogman. Councillor Williams, the floor is yours.
I was about to say the same thing. I want to give Middlewich a chance, and I'm happy to second that proposal.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers before I go to the vote? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Right, finally, Mr. Owens, do you wish to come back before we go to the vote, please?
Just only with one comment, Chair, and that's there's several references to the marina circa 20 berths. So there's a few changes. It's a few places in the document where we need to reflect that new wording if that was agreed by Cabinet.
I appreciate that, and I thank Ms Dillon for raising it with us. She's made reference to ELGP 168. Does she wish to come in before I go to the vote, just in case? I don't want to do anything illegal.
No.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I am now going to go to the vote.
Can I just say, Chair? Can I just say,
Councillor Hogman?
I'm very happy to accept the suggestions from Sheila Dillon that that reference be changed on page 182 and any other consequential amendments throughout the document.
Councillor Williams, are you likewise to agree that what Ms Dillon is suggesting?
I certainly am, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now in its amended form, I'm putting Councillor Hogman's proposition to the vote, and I will begin with, and now I'm probably going to have a list of people who are missing, aren't I? Bear with me a second.
Yes, Chairman. Councillors Critchley and Farrell aren't about.
So do I begin with myself or no? Councillor Edgar.
Approve with those amendments.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hogburn.
Approve with that amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Morton.
Can I abstain? I lost connection and I never even heard the amendments.
I am sure that is fine. Okay, Councillor Hogburn. Sorry, Councillor Morton. Councillor Redstone.
Approve with that amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smetham.
I would approve as long as it's not holding us to that number. I think it needs to be very carefully worded.
I think the suggestion was that would be the maximum.
Yes, as long as we aren't opening the door to any kind of legal or forceful challenges to something that could cause problems in the future.
Okay. I think if we were that Ms Dillon would have praised us of that before we started voting.
I didn't quite hear everything she said at the end, actually. So
okay,
if she was cut off,
she was merely suggesting that there are other references to the marina within the report that would need to be also changed to ensure that everything was consistent throughout. That's what she was.
Yeah. I saw page 198 in the.
Yeah, yes, and so she was just confirming that's what we were required to do.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Weatherall.
Approve with the amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Approve with the amendments.
Okay, thank you very much. And I am also approving with amendments.
And sorry, Chairman, Councillor Jeffrey, he's probably missed off your script because I missed him.
Jeffrey, yes, of course. Yes, I apologise. He's not on my list.
No.
Yes, apologies, my fault, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jeffrey. That was the final item of this afternoon's meeting. So thank you very much for everybody for attending. Have a good evening. Thank you to all the officers and everybody for their patience.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.